Hey everybody, welcome to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com, VisionRecordingStudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel, and welcome to another Q&A video. This week we're going to talk about the home recording studio business and some business questions. This is probably the most popular topic that I get asked about on a weekly and monthly basis. I get questions all the time, whether it's on our Facebook page, through YouTube, or through personal emails, asking me about the home studio business and what advice I would have if someone wants to start their own studio business. So we have 5 questions today I'm going to try to answer for you. Now, I've done some videos like this in the past that are already on my YouTube channel in the archive. So go out to YouTube, search for Home Recording Made Easy if you're not watching this video on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would, and search the archive, search the playlist. There is a playlist, I believe, called the Studio Biz, and in there I talk about how to get clients, how much do you charge, and some other more in-depth answers than what I'm going to give here today. But I want to try to answer these questions because these come in, like I said, all the time. So if you want one of your questions answered in an upcoming video, please go out to my Facebook page, go to facebook.com/HomeRecordingMadeEasy and give me a like over there, follow me on Facebook, and post your questions up on our Facebook page, because that's where I try to gather most of these questions for an upcoming video. So let's jump right in and let's talk about the studio business, or the home recording studio business, and see if I can help guide some of the people that are asking these kinds of questions. So question number 1, the first question is, how long did it take you to go from a part-time to a full-time studio business? So anyone that's been following me for a while now knows that I've been working out of my home in my home recording studio now, going on, what are we in, 2016, since about 2009, 2010. So it's been about 6 years now that I've gone and worked full time. Now, I started my my home studio here in about 2007 is when I purchased the home that I'm living in now, my wife and I built my home studio in 2007. Now, I've been working in the recording industry and working in freelance in commercial studios around my home state of Connecticut since about 1997, 1998. That's when I kind of started getting into the engineering side and the recording and the mixing side of things. So 1997 is when I started. Purchased my home in 2006, my wife and I, and built my home studio in 2007. And was still doing it part-time on the side. I had a full-time job that I was working in the corporate world as an operations manager in a medical manufacturing company for many, many years. I did that for almost 18 years. Always doing music as a musician, and then in 97 more as an engineer, part-time. Built my studio in 2007, and then for a couple of 2-3 years there, I was working a full-time job and building my business on the side, doing nights and weekends. And then finally in mid-2009 or late 2009 is when I was able to make the transition from a part-time business to a full-time business. So the whole process took me about, from the time I built my studio, about 3.5 years, from the time that I was running out of this studio that I'm sitting in now part-time to going full-time. So as a side note, one of the things I tell people that are aspiring to be a full-time studio owner, and again, I write a lot about this on my blog and I have some other videos on my YouTube channel, is try to keep your day job as long as you possibly can. And try to do your studio, as a part-time business where you're not relying on that income to support your family. That will help you tremendously in a lot of ways, to keep your stress level low, to not have to worry about finances where you're kind of working your full-time job if you have one, and hopefully you do, paying your bills, supporting your family, and using your studio just to help it support itself, help the income that you bring into your part-time studio to help buy new equipment, set up your websites, and do all the things that you need to start up a business. Use it as a part-time thing to where you're not relying on feeding your family, and that'll go a long way. And then be very, very calculated and careful about jumping and leaving your day job and jumping into this full time, because I can tell you, especially when you first start, especially in today's day and age, it is a very difficult thing to make a full-time business out of this right out of the gate. You got to kind of slowly build. At least that's how I did it. So hopefully that answers your questions on that. And if you have any other questions around that, you can certainly leave it on our Facebook page or hit me up on an email, and I will try to help you even further. So thanks for the question. Question number 2, what advice do you have for someone someone starting out in a home recording studio business? Again, I just kind of touched on that. My first piece of advice would be keep your day job for as long as possible before you move into a full-time venture in your home studio business, and make sure that you have enough revenue coming in over a period of time before you make that jump. Again, I didn't make that jump for a couple of years. I wanted to make sure that my first year earnings wasn't a fluke and that I can actually repeat that and that my business was growing. And once I was able to prove that the business was growing, the more time I put into it, the more it would grow. That's when I made the move to a full-time business. So that's one piece of advice. And I have others, and I have some notes here. So one of the other piece of advice is that, as I have for you, if you're trying to do this, especially full-time, is you want to try to develop over time multiple revenue streams inside of your home recording studio business. And you may think, well, what does that mean? Well, there's several things that I do and that I've have done and has implemented in my business over the years. So I'm not just dependent on one source of income. So what I mean by that is by design or by trade, I was a recording engineer where I would record bands, record artists, and that's how I kind of started, is just strictly a recording engineer, just learning how to mic up instruments, record vocals, and get a good, solid raw track recordings. And I was strictly just a recording engineer early on in my career. As I started to get more into my own business, I then became a mixing engineer, and I learned how to take those recordings and learn how to make a professional mix. And I'm still learning how to do that today. It's a journey. And so I wasn't just getting money in as a recording engineer, then I started getting money in as a mixing engineer. Then I started working as a mastering engineer and doing just some mastering work. So as a third source of income, I was working on just doing mastering projects. Now I'm getting incomes from 3 different sources. Okay, and then over the years, I also developed a network, and I got into the television and film industry and composing music for TV and film, whether it be commercials, whether it be television shows, whether it be feature films. And so that took about 3 to 5 years, slowly building that network, slowly getting into that into the business. And now I have revenue that comes in every year on music that I have placed in television and film. I work a lot with the History Channel, a lot with Discovery, and a lot with the NFL, a lot of music in the NFL and the NHL, National Hockey League. I've done some low-budget B movies, local movies in my area, and done some films. And I'm continuing to build that network, working with publishers, working with music libraries, etc., etc. So again, another revenue stream. And then a couple of years ago, as you all know, because you're watching this video, I developed Home Recording Made Easy, and I became an educator on teaching all of you and students of mine on how to do what I did and how to get better at the craft of recording, the craft of mixing, the craft of running a studio business. So as an educator, I get revenue that way. So when you're starting off in a home business or a home studio business or a recording studio business of any kind, you want to try to get as many multiple streams of income as you possibly can, because I will tell you that there are times throughout the course of the year that certain revenue streams are down and then other ones are up, where I may go a couple of months and not do any mixing jobs, but I'm doing lots of teaching. And then when the teaching tends to slow down a little bit, I will then it just so happens that I'll get some mixing jobs, or I'll get some TV work to develop some music to produce music for television. So multiple revenue streams is extremely important in this industry and in this business in particular, and it has really helped me be able to sustain a full-time business because I'm not just depending on one source of income. Okay, so that's one a piece of advice I would give you. Again, I said keeping your day job as long as possible. That's my second tip, and I just touched on that a few seconds ago. We love day jobs, and I've done videos on this on my YouTube channel before. Keep that day job as long as you can to help support yourself and your family. Use your studio as extra disposable income as you're building your business until you can make that switch, so you don't have to worry about or be overly stressed about finances, because running a business is stressful enough, and if you have to rely that solely to support your family, it makes it double stressful. Always think long term. Tip number 4. Always think long term. What I mean by that is when you're first starting out your studio business, and I did this early on in my business, and I talked about this in some other YouTube videos, as I wasn't thinking about today, thinking about the money I needed to make next week. Because as I said, I kept my day job as long as I could. So it didn't matter that I wasn't making money, so to speak. It really started off more as a part-time hobby and then developed a bit into a full-time business. But I was always thinking about, from the very beginning, what did I want my business to be like 3 years from now, 5 years from now? I talk a lot about creating goals, and there's a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about creating goals and running a studio business. Again, go search the YouTube archive. I talk a lot in detail about this point. And when I first started taking in clients and started charging money for my services, I was always thinking about, what did I want my reputation to be like? What kind of work did I wanted to do? And I always wanted to think about quality of work over quantity of work, which kind of brings me to my next point, quality over quantity, meaning that I only wanted to work with artists early on that were what I felt to be very good artists. I only wanted to record really good musicians, and if that meant that I recorded those people for free to help develop my portfolio, that's what I wanted to do. I would have much rather worked with really great musicians where I can get a really good recording, because 70% of a great record is really in the musicianship, and do that work for free a lot of times early on to build that portfolio, as opposed to charging some band $300 or $400 to come into my studio to record a 2 or 3 song demo, and the band's kind of sucks and they're kind of sloppy, and then at the end of the day, all you really have is a really great sonic sounding crappy band, if that makes sense. So I was always thinking about, I did not want to litter my portfolio with musicians and with artists that I didn't feel were really good, that didn't have the talent up front. And so what that meant was I was very selective about the type of work that I would take in, regardless of what I was charging, even if I was doing it for free. And I still do that to this day. I hand select the stuff that comes to me. And I'm very fortunate that I have enough work and enough people that want to work with me that, I'd say probably 20 or 25% of the work that gets brought my way, I turn away. And I talk about in other videos how to do that tactfully and that whole, train of thought. But I don't work with anyone that just wants to come to me and give me money. I'm very selective. Now again, I'm in a position today where I don't need that 20% of the work to support my family. I'm very, very blessed and I'm very fortunate. But even in the beginning, when I had hardly any work coming in, or in some cases had no work coming in, I was still turning away stuff in the beginning that I didn't feel like I wanted to be a part of, if that makes sense. Because again, it didn't matter because I didn't need the money. I was working full time. And by doing that, what ends up happening is, if you're very selective and you take quality over quantity, you're going to find that down the road, you're going to develop a reputation, especially if you're working in your local area, recording local acts, where you're the guy where all the best musicians go to, or you're the girl who everyone wants to work with. And you're not just one of these bargain basement, I'm willing to work for almost nothing and record any crappy band that walks through your studio. I never looked at it that way because I didn't want it to affect my overall reputation in a negative way long term. So that's what I mean when I say always think about things long term. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then the last point I would say, or the last piece of advice I would always say, and I say this in a lot of other videos, I call it investing in your craft. Always be willing to invest time and sometimes money in your craft to be able to get better at what you do. And, when you go work for a company in the real world, they call that training. A lot of times companies will send you out for training. Maybe you've experienced that in your career, where companies make an investment in you for you to get better at your job, because ultimately that's going to make the company stronger. Same thing when you're running your own business. To this day, I'm still once or twice a year taking some kind of training, whether it be in mixing or recording or video editing or whatever it is that I'm trying to do to get better. Sometimes I will spend my own money to have people teach me and coach me to get better at what I do. I call it investing in my craft. Anyone out there watching this video that's purchased one of my Made Easy products or one of my Quick Mix products, that's an example of investing in your craft. You're taking your time and your hard-earned money and you're putting faith in me, and again, I thank you so much for that, for me to help you get better at making music and productions in your studio. That's investing in your craft. And I urge you to do that. I urge you to spend time and spend some money when needed to get better at what you do. Practice makes perfect, and sometimes you need a coach or a teacher or an instructor to help you get to the next level, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else that you're more comfortable with. Invest in your craft and never stop learning and never stop growing. If you have that mindset, your business will continue to grow over time. Sometimes it takes time for those steps and those milestones to be achieved, but it will happen if you're willing to invest in your craft and realize that we're all learning and we all need to continue to learn if you want to get better. Okay? So I hope that answers your question. I know that question had a lot of points to it. So let's move on. So question number 3. This question comes up a lot. Do I need to pay taxes if I'm only working part-time on the side? Well, the short answer is yes. Depending on where you live, what state you may live in the United States, or what country you live in throughout the world, if you are charging money for a service, my guess is in most places in the world, you have to pay some kind of taxes. Now, a lot of people will work on the side, they'll work for cash. Someone hands you a couple of $100 in cash, you stick it in your pocket. Do you need to report it? I'm going to say to keep myself out of hot water, yes, you do need to pay taxes on that money. And as you get more into working in your business, you're going to find that more times than not, especially today doing over the internet, most times people pay me with credit cards and PayPal. And all that stuff is traceable and all that stuff is reportable. And yes, you should figure out, do the research in your community, in your state, in your country, what the rules are, what the laws are, and you should abide by them. If you want to be looked upon by the public as a legitimate business, you want to make sure that you, yes, have a business name and that you register it with your local government and become a legitimate business. Even if it's in your home studio, it's still a business. There's a lot of credibility and a lot of security that people have when they feel like they're dealing with a real business and not just dealing with some fly-by-night person working out of their basement. And part of that is having to pay taxes on the money that you make. So even if you're working part-time, if money is exchanging hands, chances are you have to pay some taxes. And I would just urge you to take a look at your local city, state, or country's laws and regulations and follow them, and you'll be just fine. There's tons of information online. You should be able to find that information out quite easily. But I would not suggest that you try to avoid paying taxes because that'll just get you into hot water. So let's move on. Question number 4. How do I get my name out there if I'm just a new business and I'm just starting out? Well, again, I did a full video on this on my YouTube channel. You can go search the archives again. I talked for 30 or 40 minutes on the way I did it, but here's some 4 quick things you need to think about. Number 1, obviously in today's day and age, you need some kind of a website. Make sure you have a really cool website. Make sure you have something that's easy to navigate, easy to find information, that's quick and snappy and doesn't have a lot of flashy video, lights, stars and lights going on that make the website drag. Make sure your website is designed cleanly. Make sure your website is designed efficiently and it makes it easy to navigate and that it's snappy and it doesn't lag on the internet. That's super, super important. You also want to make sure that you're taking advantage of social media today. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all the Twitter, all the different things that, the ways that people communicate today. Really, really important in getting your name out there, making sure you have a good website and that you're maximizing your impact using social media. The other way you can get your name out there, and I did this for many, many years, is go out to your local pubs and clubs and go see artists performing live in your local area. Do a lot of shaking hands and kissing babies, so to speak. Hands out lots of business cards or little flyers about you as a business, about your studio and what you have to offer. And have somewhere where they can go online and check out your studio and have a portfolio page on your website showing off what kind of work, what kind of quality work they can expect if they're going to work with you. And then it's just network. And that means lots of things. Again, inside your local community, online, on Facebook, join different groups that where your clients will tend to hang out, where musicians will tend to hang out. Get out there. You know, the more people you meet, the more you network, the more friends that you make inside of the business, the more work is going to start to come your way. Once you start working with some artists, you do a really good job for them, regardless of what you charge them, they're going to go out and tell other artists, and therefore you're going to get your name out there. So it takes time, unfortunately. But again, if you're starting off part-time, and again, if you go back to question number one, and you don't rely on your business right away to make money, it's a part-time thing, you have a full-time job or a regular real job, it can take time. Build it slowly, be consistent, and that's, when you talk about networking, we talk about social media, you need to be consistent, you need to be regular with your content, you need to be regular with your posting, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, so people can see that you're active, and the more you do that, people will start to follow you and come your way, and it will eventually turn into some kind of money-making opportunity. It just sometimes takes time. So again, go out and check out my video in the archive where I talk a lot more in depth about more specific examples, but there's just 4 things that you need to do that I would recommend to get your name out there. And then the last question for this video is, how did you go about deciding how much to charge people for your services when I first started out? And again, I talk a lot about that in the archives as well. I have a whole video on talking about this one topic. But in short, in this video, the way I did it and the way I recommend you do it is you got to do some research. Depending on what kind of services you're offering, at the time I was a recording studio, a tracking studio, so very simply, what I did is I just checked out 3 or 4 studios in my local area and found out what they were charging. And I started there as a kind of a ballpark. So for example, if somebody was charging by the hour and they were charging, say, $25 an hour to record in the studio, I would start off, maybe at $20 an hour. And as I started to build up my clientele, and as I started to build up my portfolio, and as I started to develop a name for myself, I was able to raise my rates. And once I got busy enough, I didn't really care what the other studios were charging. I was developing a pricing structure based on what I felt my time was worth and what I felt my talents were worth. But when you first start out, you gotta you can't just pick a number out of the sky. You don't want to be the cheapest person on the block because you don't want to be known as the cheap guy or gal running a studio, because that usually will kind of reflect that maybe your work and your product is really not that great. But you also don't want to be the highest guy on the block or gal on the block, because then you're not going to, especially if you're an unknown, you're not going to get people to want to spend that money on an unknown. So you have to figure out in your area, what are other people charging? If you're not a tracking studio, and let's say you're just a mixing engineer, well, that's more difficult because now you're dealing with the internet and the whole wide world, and there's tens of thousands of people who try to do what we do for a living. And again, I would do some research. Go online, see what other people are charging for mixing, and try to figure out, based on what they're charging, where you are in your skill set as far as being able to turn out what level of quality product, and then you got to kind of come up with a pricing structure. Again, in the very beginning, I did a lot of work for free just to get my name out there. Now, again, I don't suggest you do that for very long, because you don't want to be known as the free guy, because if you do that, you're screwed. But you also don't want to try to charge so much money that no one's willing to work for you. So do your research, find out what other people in your area or online are charging for the same services that you're trying to charge for, and then, be honest with yourself on where you are with your skill set. Are you just starting out? Are you a beginner? Are you an intermediate? Are you a more seasoned engineer or mixing person or recording engineer? And then try to come up with something that's just fair. And again, I'll go back to question number one. If you're doing this in a way where it's part-time, where money is not the main motivator up front, and you don't need to make the money, you could be a lot more flexible with your rates. Whereas if you're just jumping with 2 feet and you think if you just work really hard, you're going to get somewhere in this business, that doesn't work out more times than not. And you really need that money to support yourself and your family. Well, now you've kind of really limited your options. So by not needing to make money right up front, I keep going back to that, because that's the number one mistake I see people make, is they quit their job and they jump into this and they think, I'm a great engineer, I'm just going to make a lot of money. It doesn't work that way, especially if you're a home-based, one man or one woman show. It takes time. It takes time to build it. If you build it, they will come, but it takes time. So you need to be strategic. And so Not needing the money right away will help you have a lot more flexibility on what you can charge people when you're first starting out. And again, all these questions that I answered in this week's video, I have longer versions of these answers and some more ideas out in the archive on the YouTube channel. Go under the Studio Biz playlist and search out those videos, and you'll probably get a more in-depth answer. I want to keep this video somewhat reasonable in length. So that is it for this week's Q&A video about the studio business. If you have any other questions or any other comments, please leave them below this video, or again, go out to the Facebook page, post your question on my Facebook page, and I will gather up the question and I'll answer it in another video for you. Or you can always send me an email through homerecordingmadeeasy.com on my website. Go to the contact page, send me off an email, and I'll try to answer your email usually within 24 hours or so, but I get lots of emails these days, so it takes a couple of days to get back to you. Accept my apologies up front, but I will respond to you and I will answer your email. And again, for more tips, tricks, concepts, and training around everything home recording, be sure, as always, to head out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And until the next Q&A video, this has been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will speak to you guys all soon. Take care.